Okay, so I thought that I had made my last video for this RPM RC10T Ultramold, but it turns out that's not the case. A couple of days ago, oh, actually more like maybe a week ago, I found another Ultramold on eBay. It was in pretty rough shape. This is part of it here. It had a bunch of holes drilled in it and everything. But it actually wasn't labeled as an Ultramold. Ironically, or strangely, it was labeled as a vintage Traxxas with a question mark, as if the owner didn't quite know what it was. And I was the beneficiary of that, because it turns out that this particular truck, although it was, it's in rough shape, it's pretty beaten up, it actually has in very nice condition the parts that I needed to really finish this build. In particular, it had a cleaner steering rack with the white RPM drag link. That thing has been impossible for me to find. A white RPM front bumper, which I had always wanted to get for this. It's a little scratched up. It's not in perfect shape, but I cleaned it up as best I could. Maybe it's hard to see the scratches there. And it looks pretty good. It's not too bad. Certainly better than the black bumper I was using, which is quite a color mismatch. Also, it came with the RPM transmission brace. Okay, and the other piece, it had a few other things. Came with white front and rear arms, suspension arms, but crucially, because this Ultramold that I got originally came with front arms, and they were, I believe, brand new. I had to get rear arms, but the ones that I had at the time were these guys here. And you see this one has little notches in it. And that tends to happen if you're running CVDs and the drive pin here at the universal joint comes out, and then it starts slamming into the arm, and it digs a little notch into the arm. So what I really wanted was white arms that were clean, that didn't have this kind of damage. So it turns out that beat up truck actually had really nice condition white arms. So essentially what I was able to do was to take what I needed off of that truck, clean everything up, put it on this, and now I have a complete Ultramold with all RPM parts where they're supposed to be. What's also kind of interesting, which is another reason why I wanted to make this video, is that even though this has white RPM parts and this has white RPM parts, and yes, okay, this is a bit dirty, but if you clean it up, what you'll find is that not all white RPM parts are the same. Now this is pretty obvious looking at the ball cups, for example. Those are like pure white RPM ball cups compared to this white here. But I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about the actual Ultramold parts. And what stood out the most for me were actually two things. I'll go over the most obvious first. The first is this little brace right here. This is essentially, it doubles as the bottom of the shock mount. So you screw through this brace, through this shock tower into the bulkhead. And it also is like sort of a brace for this battery tray here, okay? Now I should point out the only thing really missing here is there's supposed to be two extra holes here and here to mount this shock tower to the back of the RPM bulkhead. I don't want to do that. I just want to keep this as fresh as possible. But anyway, I digress. This is the exact same part. These are both RPM parts from different white Ultramolds, and you can see that the coloring is a little different. This has a little bit of sort of a green hue to it, even though it's white. And this is more like a solid white, okay? So it was nice that this part here came on this truck, and all I had to do was clean it up, and it looks perfect. So I was able to take this off, because again, I want a nice color match for everything. So that's one thing, and the other thing, and this might be a little bit harder to see on camera, let's see if I can flip this over without scratching anything here, is the arms. So these arms came from that truck, and these were the arms that I had on this truck. And you can see, maybe it's a little hard to see on camera, but these arms here are more of a solid white, And these arms have not quite as green of a hue as these. And maybe green's the wrong terminology, because there's no green that I can see with the naked eye, but this looks more like almost translucent. A much better match, if you will, to the front arms here, okay, as well as these caster blocks and these spindle carriers. So even the white suspension arms, apparently they came in 2 variants, or, you know, it's also possible that maybe like one set was more exposed to sunlight, like maybe this set was more exposed to sunlight, and so the whiteness kind of went from this sort of softer white to sort of this harder white. That's also possible. But it does look like these white RPM parts did have some variation in the color. So it is certainly nice to be able to complete this to make it look as originally intended. So yeah, anyway, I just wanted to make a quick video updating this. So now this is actually done. And then I can take my body, which I have up here, which I think I already showed you guys that body. It's a J Concepts RC10T body, and this should mount right on there. And of course the body covers everything, so you know, I gotta figure out how to display it in my cabinet, perhaps with the body off to the side or something. But yeah, anyway, this is all done. So thanks for watching.